In this lesson, you will be learning how to define argument, claim, evidence, and warrant. You will also be able to explain the relationship between claim, evidence, and warrant. Let's start by clarifying the difference between persuasion and argument. Persuasion is when a writer or speaker makes a case using emotion and feeling in support of a claim. You'll see a lot of persuasion happening in commercials because you don't have a lot of time to prove your point. Usually the company is trying to get you to feel a certain way about their product, or the political candidate is trying to get you to feel a certain way about the other candidate. You may have used persuasion with your parents. Maybe they said you couldn't spend the night at a friend's house, and you responded that they were trying to ruin your life by making sure you were not cool at all. It probably didn't work. Argument, however, is when a writer or speaker makes a case using facts and logic in support of a claim. This is the best way to get someone to believe what you say because it is harder to argue with. But it does take a little bit more time than persuasion. Your parents are a little more likely to let you spend the night at someone's house if you make the argument that your friend's parents will be there the entire time, promise to go to bed at a decent hour, and you will even do all your homework before you go. In academics, you should try to rely on argument as much as possible. There are 3 parts to an argument. The first part is the claim. This is the statement that tells the reader what the writer wants the reader to know, believe, or understand by the end of the piece. The claim should be specific, arguable, and be able to be proven with evidence. You may have heard this in the past referred to as a thesis statement. They are the same thing. Here is an example claim. Seatbelts should be added to school buses to increase the safety for the children who ride them. Notice how the claim is specific. It says school buses, not just buses, and it says for safety. Notice that it is also arguable and can be proven with evidence. My evidence will center around the safety increase seatbelts on buses add. Evidence is the second part of the argument. Evidence is made up of facts and data that support the claim. Evidence can be quoted, paraphrased, or summarized. Evidence should always be cited. Here are some example evidence. The NHTSA is recommending lap and shoulder belts in large school buses and is considering ways to make the recommendations required by law. Currently, state and local officials, not the NHTSA, determine what safety features are required on school buses in their communities, so the NHTSA is focusing on communicating the benefits of adding lap and shoulder belts to buses. Seatbelts are icons of safety, he said, and that makes them the single most effective thing we can provide to improve the confidence of parents, policymakers, and children. This evidence, though, isn't enough to prove my claim. People can interpret it in different ways, so you have to explain your evidence. That leads us to the third part of an argument, the warrant. The warrant is a statement that explains and links the evidence to the claim. A warrant can be 2 to 3 sentences, and many may sound similar. The warrant is the most important part. If you don't include it, and your reader doesn't understand how the evidence supports the claim, your reader will be less likely to agree with you. As stated before, warrants are often multiple sentences because you have to make your thinking clear to the reader. Usually, you need to include a qualifier in your warrant. A qualifier is a word that makes a statement more general because there may be exceptions to that rule. You don't ever want to say that something will never happen because there's always somebody who is going to come back with what if, so you need to avoid that by using a qualifier. Here is a list of qualifiers you can use sorted into categories. There's qualifiers of quantity, time, certainty, possibility, necessity, and relative quality. So, let's go back to our examples to see how I explain my evidence proves that seatbelts should be added on buses. So my first piece of evidence, the NHTSA, is recommending lap and shoulder belts in large school buses as in considering ways to make the recommendation required by law. Currently, state and local officials, not the NHTSA, determine what safety features are required on school buses in their communities. So the NHTSA is focusing on communicating the benefits of adding lap and shoulder belts to buses. That's a lot of information. So the warrant is really important to be able to clearly and directly link it to our claim that seatbelts should be added to school buses to increase the safety for the children who ride them. So here's my warrant. Part 1 is my explanation. The NHTSA's job is to study transportation safety and make recommendations that increase the safety for all that travel, and they have recommended seatbelts on buses. Here's my second part to the claim, my direct link to my claim. If the NHTSA is recommending seatbelts, states should follow their recommendation and add seatbelts on buses. Let's take a look at the next piece of evidence. Seatbelts are icons of safety, he said, and that makes them the single most effective thing we can provide to improve the confidence of parents, policymakers, and children. So if we take a look at the warrant, you can notice in the explanation, I tell you who he is. Mark Rosekind, the director of the NHTSA, whose job is to determine what is safe in regards to transportation, feels seatbelts are safe and effective. Now, here is my link to the claim. If the director of the agency that's sole job is to study transportation safety feels seatbelts are effective and increase safety, then buses should have seatbelts. If you noticed, each warrant first explains and then secondly links the evidence directly to the claim. And it's extremely important that you do that with every piece of evidence that you provide. So now you know the 3 parts of an argument: claim, evidence, and warrant. You can visualize the relationship between the 3 of them using this triangle graphic. At the top, you have your claim, which is what you want the reader to know, believe, or understand by the time they finish reading your argument. Supporting the claim, you have the evidence. The warrant then supports the evidence and the claim. Without the warrant, your evidence doesn't make sense. You don't support the claim, which means that you don't prove the claim, which means that your argument goes up in smoke. So make sure that whenever you put together an argument, you have a claim with evidence and warrant to back it up.